This video is sponsored by Rocket Money. There are movies, and then there's Megalopolis. If you're worried about spoilers, no, I don't spoil it, and besides, anything I do say is not going to take away from the experience of watching this thing, so enjoy. Described by the filmmaker himself as a Roman epic, Megalopolis is the latest from Francis Ford Coppola, director of The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, The Conversation, one of our living legends if you ask me. But what makes this one so special is it's a dictionary definition passion project. I don't think a project could have more passion than this. Coppola has had the film in development since the early 1980s, and while he hasn't been technically writing it that entire time, he has been piecing it together since then. Certain stars in the film, like Lawrence Fishburne and Giancarlo Esposito and Jon Voight, have been attached to the project since the early 2000s, when it was originally planned to also star De Niro, Leonardo DiCaprio, James Gandolfini, Paul Newman, and Uma Thurman. Wow. The film began pre-production in 2001, but was almost immediately put on hold due to the 9/11 attacks. Jump forward to 2007, and without much help with the development, Coppola did consider dropping the entire thing. But he shared a pretty interesting quote about it in the production notes for the film that I think is very enlightening, which reads, "I like to make movies I don't know how to make, because if you don't know how to make them, the movie starts telling you how to make it, and that's very exciting when you listen." So he kept on, and eventually when he hit the ripe age of 80 years old, he thought, "I cannot wait any longer," which led to probably the most popular thing people know about this film, which is the fact that he self-financed it, going as far as selling a piece of his wine business so that he could make it the way he wanted to make it. It cost $120 million. It's probably the most expensive independent film that I can think of. It has no US distribution yet, and it premiered at the Cannes Film Festival just a few weeks ago, and I was lucky enough to see it. My thoughts? I think it's a special movie, and while I can't say I'm on the front lines for it, I am about to defend it a little bit, because I can see a lot of hate coming its way in the next few months. But damn, $120 million. That's a lot of money. Speaking of money, I want to quickly thank this week's sponsor, Rocket Money. Guys, it's summer, which means it's time to go on a nice trip. I'm saving up for a few trips myself, and I really want to get on top of my expenses. Well, today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. I'm using Rocket Money to cancel unwarranted subscriptions. They help you safely and securely identify reoccurring charges and cancels unwanted subscriptions for you. They make it super easy. You can do it all within the app. With just a few taps, you've done it. You don't have to worry about any customer service calls or any of that jazz. It's perfect if you're like me and you subscribe to free trials for streaming services because you want to watch an obscure movie, and then months later you realize you never canceled that free trial, so you've been subscribed to the streaming service that you never use. It's perfect for stuff like that. I'm also using Rocket Money to set budgets. It's really awesome. They analyze your spending habits to create a custom budget that works with your lifestyle, automatically monitor your spending by category, and get notifications when you've exceeded your limits. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year when they use all the features, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. To save more and spend less, join the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/Karsten or click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/Karsten to get started for free. So what is this thing actually about? The film follows a quote-unquote genius played by Adam Driver who has the power to stop time and who wants to turn a failing city into a utopia. But what happens when the city's mayor, played by Giancarlo Esposito, fights back? That's a very simple way of describing this thing. The film also trails off into a bunch of other directions that follow Aubrey Plaza's character, Wow Platinum, a financial journalist looking to get wealthy who weaves her way into the family. I'm not going to move on from Wow Platinum just yet. That's one of the best character names I've ever encountered. Shia LaBeouf plays Claudio Pulcher, Cesar's annoying cousin who wants to destroy him, as well as Julia, the mayor's daughter, who also happens to become Cesar's love interest. Writing it out, it does seem a little bit clunky, doesn't it? There are several moving pieces to this thing, but to be honest, I don't find the actual plot very confusing at all. Which isn't to say the movie is straightforward, as it's kind of a disorienting experience. Characters speak in pretty wordy ways. It does read like a collection of phrases and lines that Coppola had been collecting for over 40 years, jumbled into one script that loosely ties them all together. And in the process, the messaging does get a little wonky here and there. You don't really walk away with a clear idea of what just happened. If there's one word you can use to describe this movie, and there are many words you can use, inconsistent is a big one. Megalopolis is, at the end of the day, a film of jumbled ideas ideas. Like I said, it's as if you're flipping through Coppola's journal and getting the bits and the pieces, but they don't all flow as nicely as they need to really communicate these ideas thoroughly, the way normal movies work. And I honestly think a huge part of why that is because a lot of the actors feel like they're on different wavelengths. Aubrey Plaza brings a lot of comedy to the film, which helps elevate the ridiculousness of it. I do think she's probably the best part. Adam Driver, too, is clearly having a ton of fun. He obviously commits like he always does. Yeah, it's a good Adam Driver performance. Giancarlo Esposito is delivering a very passionate and over-the-top performance to sell the evilness of this mayor. It's a little bit more intense than everybody else. Jon Voight is kind of just phoning it in. Every time he delivers a line, it does sound like the first time he's ever read it. Shia LaBeouf is weird. End of story. And Natalie Emanuel, who plays Julia, seems the most confused. She plays her character very straight and dry. She's, in my eyes, one of the only normal characters in the movie. And that said, she feels kind of out of place next to everything else in the film. She feels lost in the chaos of it, almost like Coppola didn't really know how to write her at all. And when the filmmaker is clearly going for a big, vibrant, out-of-this-world experience that's very surreal, a film that's barely holding itself together as is, any loose bolt is enough to bring the whole thing tumbling down, and I'm afraid Natalie Emanuel kind of brings down a lot of the scenes. A comparison that I can't stop making in my head is Leos Carax's Annette, a film from a few years ago that, hey, also wasn't that well received and starred Adam Driver, but that I got a kick out of. It's a big, sweeping opera about a doll who becomes a pop star that commits to the absurdity at such a massive level, I couldn't help but fall in love with it, flaws and all. But I think Annette lands on its feet and is also exhausting at a certain point because every single piece of it is bizarre. Every performance just goes for it. Every scene takes you somewhere you don't expect to go. There's a tremendous sense of control. Megalopolis is anything but controlled. Where it seems so many people gave up on the film is the fact that for it to work, you have to submit yourself to it and let go. Know that it's going to be a collection of ideas that don't all entirely work together, and you'll be fine. It's something Esposito is trying to get at in the press conference for the film, admitting that even he didn't really know what the film was about by the end, but that's okay. And that's all great. A film can get away with this quality, but if there are enough tiny little choices that don't work, that feel awkward, dated, or clunky, you reach a point where you can't really give in anymore. You can't ignore it. And that's what I feel holds this thing back. It's just inconsistent. I stand by the fact that it's a special movie. Notice how I'm not saying good or bad. It's not just special in the sense that it's a big, ambitious, unhinged passion project. I think we've established that I like those kinds of movies, and we've seen a few of those in the last few years. It's not special in that way. I think Megalopolis stands somewhere beyond that. Like, its very existence is going to be something we study and look back on for a very long time. Not in a, like, Showgirls way, but more in a Megalopolis way. The film can be read as an allegory for plenty of things, but as I mentioned in my can recap, when I see something like this, in the middle of such an existential year for the film industry, specifically Hollywood, not a bad year, just an existential year, I see it as a pretty inspiring film. It's about a man with wealth and power who feels he can fix a dying empire, who feels a utopia is possible, and his ambitions and obstacles, for the most part, seem to mirror the actual process of getting this film made. Whether that was intentional or not, the creative freedom of it, the good and the bad, is a spectacle I couldn't help but feel grateful for and wrapped up in while watching it. A frustration some have felt with the film is that they walk away empty-handed, that it doesn't answer any of the questions it sets up, like what an ideal world would look like, how we can get there, who can help us get there. And that's because it makes the case that the people in charge, the ones with the money, aren't equipped to do that. People are flawed, love gets in the way, you can't expect a changed world from one person. And it feels like that's, to me, what the film is about. The same way you can't expect one of our greatest filmmakers to save cinema, even with complete creative control, because they'll end up giving Jon Voight a fake boner that hurts people. I'm not going to elaborate on that. The film is certainly self-indulgent, but to look at Coppola as seeing himself as some self-proclaimed god for making a film like this would be a complete misunderstanding of what the film is saying, how it breaks down its lead for thinking the same way. Instead, I see the film as pushing an ideology, expressing the potential of creative freedom, rather than trying to be the solution to the problem itself. In being this, there is a lot of good shit, There's also a lot of terrible shit. Yes, it's inconsistent. Yes, it's uncontrolled. But more than anything, I see it as a fearless movie, unafraid to be imperfect. To get its point across, I think it needs to be flawed. I think it needs to mess up and sometimes come across unfinished. I'm not saying all that to give the film an excuse and to give it a pass for some of the choices that it makes. Still think it's 3.5, but I do think these are all things worth taking into consideration when you kind of see where the film was coming from with its approach. Megalopolis is far from perfect, clearly, but I do think it proves itself to be a kind of film that can, and more importantly, should exist. The first and last of its kind. And you know what? That's what I have to say. Thanks for watching. Go watch Megalopolis and form your own opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.